Hey, Adventure Alan here, and we're going to talk about the best backpacking stoves. And one of the things that we've done with all these stoves and combinations of these stoves and pots is we've tested them in cold temperatures around freezing, and we've also tested them in cold temperatures around freezing with wind. And that turns out that really differentiates a lot of these stoves that look similar but actually have dramatically different performance, especially when you start talking about cold and wind, and that will differentiate your 3+ season stoves from your 2-season stoves and your 3-season stoves. So anyway, what I thought I'd do is just give you a quick overview of the cast of characters of these different stoves that we're using. So we are going to move into here, and we are going to start here. This stove here is the Jetboil Stash. It is the newest Jetboil stove. It's a game changer. It is half the weight of these other Jetboil stoves here, and in warm weather without too much wind, it has similar performance. This is one of our favorite stoves. It's the Jetboil Minimo. The Minimo's strength is that it does exceptionally well in wind and cold. That's because it has a regulated burner, and you can see it has a windscreen around the burner, so it does exceptionally well. Next over here is the Jetboil Flash. And this stove is pretty much the most popular backpacking stove going. It is a blowtorch. It has super high heat output. It boils stuff very quickly. It's not the world's greatest simmering stove, and it's not the world's most wind-resistant stove. But given 2-season conditions, it's a great stove. Moving over here, this is one of our favorite stoves here. This is an MSR Pocket Rocket. This is the deluxe stove, so it has a regulated burner. And then I'll take the top off here, but this burner has a built-in sort of windshield that's very wind resistant. So this stove does amazing performance in the wind. Actually, if you do this and take this Olecamp XTS pot and put it on this stove, you have some just amazing cold weather and wind performance. Moving over to the next stove here, this is the competitor to the MSR Pocket Rock Deluxe, and this is the Soto Windmaster. And again, this same wind-resistant design, which is and it also has a regulated burner. So it also does exceptionally well in cold weather and wind, much better than the unregulated stoves. And actually, take a second here, I gotta flip this cable over to the other side. Okay, because I'm moving down here. All right, so this stove here, this is the MSR Reactor. This is the gold standard for winter mountaineering for people who need to boil water really fast, and it has this very interesting burner here, and this is if you really need to boil snow and it's blowing wind and it's freezing cold, this is probably a stove you want. That being said, either of these two stoves, the Soto Windmaster or the MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe, combined with a heat exchanger pot like that, can get very close to this stove at half the cost. Sort of going into the budget range, this is an OTOH, or I forget what the name is. It's an OTOH or X-City. There's a bunch of generic stoves like this that cost about $13 on Amazon, and they do a reasonably good job. It does have a slightly distributed burner here. It's a little more wind resistant. Finally, the classic, the MSR Pocket Rocket, an inexpensive stove, reasonably wind resistant, but not regulated, and so doesn't do quite as well in cold as wind as the deluxe version. And then finally, sitting out on the plate over here are two stoves that I just ran out of canisters to put on. But this is the BRS titanium stove, very, very light stove. But a very, very small diameter burner that is not super wind resistant, but super inexpensive. And then this is a Covea Spider remote canister stove. So This actually connects to a remote canister. You can do it in an inverted feed. You can put it in a water bath. And so if you really need to do some serious cold weather cooking, I'd actually pick this over probably the MSR reactor in terms of a cold weather performer. Anyway, there you have it. We have also mixed and matched some of these when we tested with the Pocket Rocket with a different pot. We've even done the gas Frankenstein thing and combined this Jetboil pot with the MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe. It actually turned out to be our top performer. This particular combination beat out every other stove in the guide in cold and 5-mile-an-hour wind. Anyway, there you have the cast of characters for our stove guide. We might add a few more in, I don't know, but this is what we have right now. And so without further ado, we'll jump into the individual discussions of the stoves. Okay, so we are doing a burn test on a stove here, cold and wind. It's about around freezing here. I have this fan going here. We've got a 5-mile-an-hour wind on the pot, and we are watching its temperature go up over time. And what I'm expecting to happen with this pot, the stove, which has a very low BTU output, is that it's going to hit steady state. It's actually not going to boil. It's going to get to the point where the wind and the cold and the heat that the stove generating become equal. I'm guessing it may not even make it to 100 degrees before things level out, and it would just hold the pot at 100 degrees forever. But anyway, this is what really separates the good stoves from the weaker stoves, and this is an unregulated stove with a low BTU output, and it's not particularly wind resistant. And these stoves just hit a steady state temperature. The one I just tested before only made it up to 50 degrees and then just held steady. As I said, I think this stove's going to do a little better, but I don't think it's going to reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So anyway, interesting. Okay, so you hopefully have been waiting for this. You've plowed through all this video. You want to learn about the Frankenstove. Well, the Frankenstove is this Jetboil Stash Pot combined with our top-rated burner, which is the MSR Pocket Rocket Deluxe burner. Again, we raved about its performance in cold and wind. So you take that cold wind performance, you add it to this pot, and you have a killer setup. Again, this will beat this $200 mountaineering stove, this MSR reactor, which weighs twice as much. But before we go into that, I'm going to give you some reasons why you shouldn't buy this stove. First of all, this is an expensive setup. You have to buy the whole $135 Jetboil Stash system to essentially buy this pot. So this turns into a $135 pot. And then you have the additional cost of this burner, which is about $70. So you're looking at about a $200 stove system, which is a bit steep for most people, which is why we think that probably buying this $30 Olecamp pot, if you're not concerned about weight and a little extra performance, is a better version. So Super Stove is way more economical. But this stove is way lighter, and it performs even better. The other problem is that this Jetboil Stash Pot was designed to go with a low BTU burner. This is the Stash's original burner, and the low BTU burners do have an advantage that they're very fuel efficient. So as long as you're not in super cold conditions, they are more fuel efficient and they boil water fast. What happens is this burner gets into trouble in cold and wind because it's not a regulated burner, it's a low BTU burner, and it's not wind resistant. So in cold and wind, it kind of chokes. Whereas this thing, the cold and wind doesn't bother at all. But here's the problem, is that this pot is designed for a low BTU burner. So not only was it never designed for this burner, and Jetboil would never recommend that you use it or even want you to use it, there's also a problem. These are pretty thin fins, and there's a problem of maybe melting them, warping them, delaminating them from the bottom with this high BTU burner. That being said, Allison and I have used this setup in the desert. It worked fine, but we were careful. The only thing we did is boil water in it. I would be a little leery of using this stove with food in it and creating a warm insulated pocket in the bottom and potentially warping or melting these fins. That being said, let me sing the praises of this stove for you. This was our top performer, both for fuel efficiency and boil times in freezing temperatures with wind. This boiled a point of water in 1.8 minutes. Fastest boil time ever. And this stove is also, system is all very light. It's just slightly heavier than with using the standard Jetboil burner. It's probably around 8 ounces. So lighter than pretty much any other stove system out there, and incredible all-round performance, with the caveats that it is both expensive and the use of this pot on that burner is not approved. So we can't recommend that you use it. We use it, we love it, we think it's a great stove, but again, we use the term Frankenstove kind of not lightly. There are some potential concerns with using this stove.